Welcome everyone to ZGG Silver Scraps episode 3. Today we are joined as always by Colonel to my
You
left
already messed it up.
from
You already messed it up.
Did I mess it up?
Yeah,
To my left,
we're
right?
never gonna get it
We
right.
just went
ever.
2 minutes into
Messed it up.
this.
You raised your left hand and pointed right. What did you do that for?
There we go. We're going. Got it. Colonel from Monkeys and Training Literal Monkeys, I'm sorry. From the Literal Monkeys organization. We've got Leper, right?
That's right. Yeah.
From FTD below. And then over there, we got Decker from Green Squad Gaming. I apologize, everyone. Decker had been very deliberate right before we started this to tell me exactly where everyone was, and then I just messed it up from the get-go.
I'm done.
Anyways, thank you to Scuffed Scraps. On today's show, we're going to tackle our irrational predictions for the end of the regular season, entirely based on the last 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks, in fact, of ZGG IBS. We're going to start off with talking about the Void group, and then we're going to go into Shadow Isles, and at the end of the day, we're going to wrap it all up with a bird's eye view of both groups and kind of run through our thoughts about the standings there. So to kick things off, let's stare into the void and pray it does not stare back.
Okay. So we have our void predictions, right? Do we already there's some spicy stuff that's showing up.
I
Right.
think we all kind of agree
On a couple things.
on a couple.
Yeah,
On a couple things.
on a decent amount of things.
There's a
we're
spectrum
all-
of agreement here.
right.
That's a good way
So
to put
the
it.
top three for all of us is the same. Where we have the top three is different.
Yeah.
The bottom four for all of us is the same, but where we have them is different.
I am all in on the Goon Squad anime arc.
You are.
Shonen protagonist team. They're gonna top the charts. This is my rational prediction. They have seen some trials and tribulations in the last 2 weeks and then the whole season before that, but it's only making them stronger. They're only gonna end up on top.
If you were in our script, you might feel a little less sure about that.
It's nice that we have the anime storyline, right? But in my limited experience of watching esports, I've only seen the anime storyline come to fruition once. Usually they get crushed.
Yeah, you usually Goliath beats David, but
I believe, I try to be as objective as possible based on I know scrim results that you guys don't know and stuff like that, but so I've got my boys at third. I thought putting them higher might be a little more biased than I wanted to show, but I'm here for the anime story arc.
I was a Dark Age CLG fan. I was a fan back in 2014, man.
Before
Yeah,
And I
MSG?
was there. I was mentally and emotionally there for Madison Square Garden, man.
It
And I'm here
somehow
for the Goon
was
Squad
worse
Madison
for
Square Garden
CLG than
season.
it is now.
What'd you say? No,
It
this
somehow was worse for
CLG doesn't
CLG
exist
than it is
anymore.
now.
There
not
was the
better.
Dark Age, the Faith Age, the Golden Age, and then the Abyss.
And so
Just-
we're on the same page. We're recording this on Sunday, so this is actually the most up to date episode we've done
yes, this is
yet.
true.
So Sunday morning. So did you guys get to see the CLG 100T game yesterday?
Yes, I did. I caught
did
the
not
tail
watch.
end of
I
it. By
was
tail end of it, I mean
working.
I know that's not what we're here to talk about, but it was a banger. So if you didn't see it, you should go back and
Yeah.
watch it. But let's get into this. I'm getting us off track already.
So Decker and Colonel are exactly the same.
Wait, are
and
we?
I think we're both
Holy, we
we're
are.
both a little
wow. Okay.
bit stupid. I'm honestly gonna say I think both of ours are a little bit dumb, but
Well, I disagree.
What's dumb about it? What do you think is dumb about your picks here?
I really am unsure if the level of confidence I have in VBU in my predictions is warranted. They got okay, so let's look back for a second. They had a very rough week 1, right?
Yes.
Well,
And
you
in
say
week
very
2
rough, but they went 2-1 against the best team. What I think you also think is the best team in the league, right? Which is Fallen
They play
University.
GSG?
No, they played.
So
Irrational.
But-
Remember,
but-
irrational.
So here's my
what I'm
problem.
gonna say though is that, at least arguably for me, a lot of where I've gone with my predictions are based off of my perceived mental strength of teams. And some of the people that I have lower are teams that I feel are going to struggle or hit a hard slump or something like that.
So that's not in
VBU
my consideration at all. So
it's all over my
I don't know
consideration.
enough people to know what their mental is like.
So the fact that they have people in place to buffer, from what I have heard, are the two like weakest mentally people on VBU. They've got somebody in the top lane again, and they've got somebody in the mid lane again there that can act as a buffer or step in or act as a reset button. That they're going to be better able to bring out all the full potential that they have.
Here's my problem with VBU. Here's my problem.
Okay.
Their week 1 was atrocious. And I ripped on them last episode or the episode before because of how bad the draft was. And thankfully, hopefully, the bully listened to me and decided that he would not let his players draft for themselves. And their draft looked way better. But they still dropped a game. No, actually, they didn't.
They did not.
But
they wanted to drop game 1. They were trying really hard not to win that one.
They finally got something that worked. And then the day after, they swapped out the top laner that they had in for the 2-0 and removed him. It's like, we finally got something that worked. Let's change it. What is
the top laner was Cat, right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
So
that was already in the works for him to be out.
Yeah.
I also think that he was,
which is why I'm so disappointed, because he played good. And then
we don't think we were watching the same game. I think
a lot of top laners, if they were in the same position, would have rolled over so hard that the game was over.
What I remember from the match that we had, because we played them in week 2, was that GSG played them week 2 for context, is that they put him on Catface was on Kale, I think, in game 1, and we just kept swapping the Aurelia into Kale, and the Aurelia kept eating Kale. But the game, it's IBS, and closing out IBS games before 35 minutes is hard, and it went to a 40-minute game, and Kale did Kale things, and like that wasn't like any particularly good things from, like, there was a couple times that he died 1v1 under tower versus Aurelia without ulting themselves. Like, I don't think that they were doing anything particular, but what I highlight about VBU is that their team fighting was amazing. Like, I don't think if I'm looking at this roster, I don't think that there is an all-star, just like a best in their position in the league. But I have them so high up, and I know I'm just skipping over TFU, but we'll get to that. I have them in second because I think their team play is that good. I think their team play is going to carry them through. Like, they might lose the early game, but when they start getting to team fighting, maybe that's bully. Maybe that's like macro coaching and them understanding macro better than other teams in the league. But I really think that VBU, from what I've seen, is probably the best. Well, not the best. In my top 3 for the best team fighting teams in the entire league. And I think that'll carry them.
I can understand where you're coming from, and that plays a big factor in where I put them, is their ability to just play team fights together and win, right? I don't personally feel that's an indication. The ability to team fight well is not an indication of macro skills to me. It's an indication of how to play the team fights, sure. And
yeah, well, their macro was also very good, is what I meant to throw it in there. I thought their macro was also very good.
That's going to get them a long ways, right? That's going to get them solid, healthy spot in playoffs come end of season. I am just not comfortable putting them higher.
That they're making roster changes at this point. If they stop making roster changes, is a good sign.
Please stop.
I like there's a level of in low elo amateur competition, right? There's an element of acceptable early season
absolutely
roster moves. Then there also is Rifters.
Yeah.
The Rifters Award. Who gets we shouldn't
it?
Give that out.
That's the most
right now, I think VBU is the primary candidate for the Rifters Award.
It's
not as bad as Rifters, but they're the closest of anyone.
I think we should petition Feathers for a trophy for whoever gets the
We
Rifters
used
Award.
to have the Black Jones 88 award for most teams played on during an IBS.
Wow, I forgot about him.
We used to have that. Then
Is
there
that
was
Token?
TJ.
I know Token had a bunch of.
No. Then TJ last split was submitted on 4 different teams.
Wow, like at the start.
At the start, like at the beginning, he was submitted on 4 different teams.
Excellent.
And we retired the award at that point because we couldn't think of something better than that. And for the record, the Black Jones 88's record for the number of teams he was on in one split was 6.
That's a lot. That's insane. That blows my mind. Ideally, if VBU can lock in their roster going forward, I would agree that will cement them top 3 for me, and it seems like the rest of us have them top 2, if not number 1.
And this is similar to their arc last split. It's they came off initially looking rather weak, and they climbed to being the second team.
Yep, I do.
Yeah.
I want to make my petition for TFU. If you guys, if there's anything else to say about VBU, or do we want to
talk your heresy, Decker?
My heresy. I'm not a traitor, I swear.
Right now, it's I wouldn't say it's heresy. I think that true. TFU is the strongest team.
He's just
right
making
now
fun of me.
in
he's
this
making
division.
fun of me because he has my team higher than I do. That's what he's doing. TFU, it's 2 people for me. It's Bakad and it's Young Rich Boy. Like they're jungle and they're mid. I think both of these 2 players are candidates for best in position for this division. I think the mid is a very tough race between a lot of teams, but they have both like put up crazy numbers. Like, so the Young Rich Boy, I know Colonel's a big fan of those traditional mage players, and that's what he does. You know, he plays the traditional mages, and we have like, I feel like half the rosters are, we have mage players, and then we have half of them are just assassin players, like this assassin more carry styles. And you know, it's hard to play an assassin into Victor and Vigar. You know, like that makes your life a lot harder. But I think that those 2 players are going to single-handedly give TFU success. But I also think that TFU's bot lane is kind of like sleeper, putting up really, really good and consistent stats. It seems just like a really well-rounded team. I don't want to just like not mention their top laner. Like Top Baller is a good has shown good stats, but I think that overall jungle mid are just, again, candidates for best in group, and the bot lane putting up super consistent, good CS numbers, good KP numbers. This team is the team to beat for me.
Can I interject?
Yeah,
because I have the Fallen at the number 1 position, and I'm glad you talked about the other roles, because before last Sunday, before the Fallen, I was the caster for their game, so I was able to watch it in real time. Before that, I was probably going to put them at either 2 or 3, because it was known quantities, right? We knew Bakad was ridiculous. We knew Young Rich Boy was playing really, really well. And then I watched them on stream, and I couldn't help but notice how much better the rest of the team played than I would have thought.
Mm-hmm.
Before watching their games, I thought it was just the jungle show. It was the biggest jungle difference out of any game, and he played it on so many different champs. But then watching the rest of the roster play, and it doesn't feel like there's a weak point on this roster. There's no one that I could point to and I could say, like, they were playing very poorly. They had a lot of mistakes. They were the reason that game was close. Neither of the games were close, and none of the players actually have any room to blame, because there were so few mistakes that were actually made.
Yep.
So that's why I have them at number 1.
Right.
They're just straight up the best team, and it's a race to catch up to the Fallen University.
Leper has them. Leper disagrees.
Yeah, let's hear.
Or at least Leper thinks that the people will catch them. Is that what you're saying?
I definitely think that people will catch them. We've already talked about it with CBR, and that's kind of why we all collectively have CBR on the lower end here, right? We've talked a lot about TFU, but look at who they've played, right? They played Abyssal, and they've played VBU Titanium. And VBU Titanium in that first week, we kind of agreed, played really, really bad.
Mm-hmm.
So they haven't gone up against some of the better teams yet. What happens when they get tested? And I have a lot of questions about that. Yeah, that's
And it's
really
important to
where I'm
remember
coming from. Is it's
not
hard with these predictions, as you all
Mm-hmm.
know, because you've done them here off just 2 weeks.
Right.
We don't
And that's the
have
point.
a
I
lot
have
of
no idea what
information.
I'm doing.
right.
So
And
we
that's
have
the
no
point.
idea what the heck is going to happen. But
And we're
I have them the
probably
lowest because I think that with the things that VBU has done, they're a veteran organization. They know what they're doing. Same with GSG. I have more faith there that those two organizations are going to be able to pilot through the inevitable slump
Yes. That's where a lot of
than
my standings are
TFU.
coming from, is what organizations have shown so far in this wide 2-week data set that we have. As
Math.
well as historically, like what organizations have shown that they can, and teams have shown that they can like grow, right? This across the regular season in IBS, it's which team can succeed early, and then which teams can grow, right? So I was on a team that succeeded early and rode that all the way through, but we didn't grow. We were one of the two teams that everyone was trying to chase, and that VBU caught up to us, right?
Mhm.
RAR stayed ahead of us, things like that. Is the Fallen University to me is the next, like, I guess, revolution almost, right? Where they're going to sit on the top. Or how much are they going to grow? We don't know. Are they going to be challenged enough to force them to grow? I don't know. But I think that VBU and GSG are the two teams that are going to lead the growth race, and catch up to them and even surpass them. The other teams on this, the other teams that we haven't talked about yet, are the ones to me that I don't think are going to be able to keep the tempo, the growth, like they're not going to be able to keep up in the race, in my opinion, to the end of the season.
If we were
Beyblades is a
ranking
question
the
mark. They
teams
might,
off,
but the other two, I am not confident in.
if we were ranking off of growth, right, I would put Abyssal above the other two. I just feel that Abyssal has started the furthest behind.
Okay, I see what you're saying, and it is important. I think we need to continue to like remind people that these are end of season predictions, and they're not power rankings right now. That's not what we're doing.
Not at all.
No.
What we're doing is because people are going to listen to this where their team is, right? I think so. Like, I think we need to like keep reminding people that this is like, we've seen 2 weeks of play, and we're just going to throw some information at the wall and see at the end of the split how we predicted it, how we guessed.
Exactly. This is putting ourselves at the end of week 10 saying, who do we think is going to be at the relative first through sixth place in the void? I want to hear some thoughts about one of the more exciting matchups, or at least results, from last week. Beyblades and CB rookies.
Yeah, so I'm not confident if this was an exciting win for Beyblades or a disappointing win for CB rookies.
I know where I stand on that one, and that is a disappointing performance by CBR.
Yeah, we had a lot of high expectations for them. I was on the hype train. The hype train has lost its conductor, but at the same time, the flip side of that coin, which I have to give credit to, Beyblades with their first set of games with their full roster, putting Willow Haven in the jungle and moving out of the jungle into the mid lane for Commander Killer.
Right.
They looked good. There's as much as we can rip on CB rookies, because that was a lackluster performance from a team that we expected more from. Beyblades really showed up, and I'm excited for that. And also, it's important to note when we look at these three teams in the bottom, how many teams make it out of the group?
4. Yeah.
So one of these 3 does.
Yes.
And I
That's
think
the important
it's
thing to
gonna
look at when you look
be
at it.
CBR. Like I have a really, really hard time with the strength of people that CBR has of seeing them not make playoffs. Like I have a very, very hard time seeing that. And I think that based on what we've seen so far, yes, the first week Beyblades didn't have their roster, right? But it's kind of on both ends. We've seen these teams falter under resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's my concern on both ends.
I want to lean into to talk about at least my standings, because I think I'm the furthest deviation from the norm here. I'm leaning on that irrational, right? I'm going with my spicy picks. I went through and I just predicted for myself, okay, looking at all the matchups going down, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, based on just where I'm at with the information that I'm considering valuable. And that led to CBR being at the bottom. But to me, it's so much of a toss up, right? Like if I was to try to apply rational reasoning to this, right, and be appropriate, I really am not sure. There are certain factors that I was mentally tuning over others, right? I was favoring the momentum, the growth, and the kind of the underdog factor for Beyblades, for Abyssal, and I was favoring the challenges of losing to Beyblades, of having kind of clashing personalities, and the what seems to me as the difficulty in losing gracefully, mentally and literally in game.
Mm-hmm.
All those things come together, and that's where I ended up. If I was going to say, if these trends continue based on these last 2 weeks, this is where I think things end up for these teams.
I just don't see a. I don't. I'm kind of with Leper in the fact that like I put CB Rookies as 5th, and that was difficult for me between Beyblades and CB Rookies because I look at like the CB Rookies team, and there's like no excuse for them to not be in playoffs.
I do agree with that.
I think Swag. I mean,
on paper, they should not have lost last week.
Yeah, that's the problem. Is there's no good reason to say they should miss playoffs, but there's also no good reason to say that they should have dropped this game, and they did.
Right, that's fair. I think,
and that's completely fair. That's completely fair.
So because it hurts me to see. I've said that I think every podcast now. I think Swag's a really really good jungler, and
every podcast you'll say that.
I've said it. I love like if we did
Swag segment.
fantasy IBS, I would first round Swag. I would do it. I wouldn't, but I would probably second round Swag.
Watson, man.
But we lost Texas camera for a second. Not Texas.
We lost my camera. It'll be back in a second.
But and then Bob in the top lane, right? Like Bob's a really good top laner. I think he is probably in my mind kind of the point of the spear for this team right now. And it's going to be growing. I'm kind of leaning toward the pessimistic side with Colonel of like, there's no reason for them to miss playoffs, but I think they might miss playoffs. And with Beyblades being on an uptick, I think that might. The problem in the bottom half of the standings right now is that dropping games to other bottom half teams is really, really bad.
That's the important part.
So, already having dropped that game to Beyblades, it makes your season a lot harder. So we'll see. I've got them like in a solid 5th place. I think my 5 and 4 could easily switch. I think my 1 and 2 can switch, and GSG, I'm trying to be objective, I think could go anywhere.
Sure.
But
here's my argument is that you touched on it because the head-to-heads are so important. And for a group where, to be completely honest, the Void is much less open, in my opinion, than Shadow is. I think a Shadow is just about anyone could land anywhere. But in a group that's not as open, 4, 5, 6 is incredibly open. Yeah. And any one of them can be in 4, any one of them can be in 6. And when Beyblades, yes, they didn't have their full roster, but regardless, they dropped a game to someone that we have all agreed is going to be 1st, 2nd, or 3rd. So who knows? They might have just lost that game if they had their roster or not.
You're
which
making really
means
good points, right? Like
that
if you're sorry, go ahead.
you can. So when you drop a game to someone who's also fighting for that fourth spot for all of us, then all of a sudden, regardless of which team you think is better, there comes a point where can they make up the difference, right?
Exactly.
Because
They have one
now
more
they're on
matchup,
a
right?
point, yeah, now they're in a point where any any loss between the bottom, honestly, bottom four teams can ruin their chances because it takes one more toss up of Beyblade's wins where CB Rookies loses, where all of a sudden they can't make it in. You know,
Exactly.
that's because regardless of how open this group is, the bottom three teams all have a chance at that bottom spot, and missing this game is a huge
Yeah.
problem for CB Rookies moving forward.
You know what I feel bad
The thing
about?
that I'll say too is anything could happen, right?
Exactly.
I felt super strongly at this point last split that VBU was a bottom tier team. When we did this last split, I had at this point in time, I had VBU at 9th place. And they made it all the way to finals, right?
Yeah.
So it's anything can happen here.
Anything.
And
Literally
this
anything.
is we're arguing incredibly seriously over what amounts to
We have no idea
writing
what's
a
gonna
book report off of
Right.
a one-page summary
Yeah.
of like War and Peace, right?
Well,
Like
well,
it's
Well, speaking of none of us know what's actually gonna happen, let's talk about Abyssal for a second. Because
Yes.
I actually really think that, like, I have them last, but I am more optimistic about this team than their record should allow me to be. I mean, so
Yes.
I
would agree.
They've had two rough losses. One of them is to TFU, which I completely excuse, because you should lose to TFU, and the other one was to CB Rookies, right, in week one. And then after week one, they made some roster changes, right? They put their mid laner back top lane. They brought in with the Magical Girls, right, coming in mid.
Yep.
And then is it Grim is going in for bot? Is that, I think that's right. I think I wrote that down correctly. So they made those changes into their week against TFU. So I think this week they're playing against VBU, which is another hard match for them. Like they've kind of got a mental test ahead of them. So, like, I think if they show life this week, especially if they take a game off, but even in O2, if Abyssal shows life this week against VBU, I think there is a good chance that they can make a playoff run. I mean, they have a lot of solid players around their roster. It's just, can they take 2 weeks of potentially getting a beating, starting 0-3, and then making that climb back? Because on the like we were talking about, they've only dropped one game that they really needed to not drop to make a playoff run. See, they can lose to Fallen University and VBU. They can go 0-4 against them and still make a good playoff run.
Exactly.
One of the things that's overall really interesting about this format and the way that things are is with 4 teams making it out with double round robin. And so all of these teams will play each other again.
I love that.
That we are also seeing collectively, top to bottom in both divisions, it's close. I think the gap is bigger in the Void than Shadow Isles, right? But as time has gone on in IBS, the individual gaps and the disparity across the league has shrunk for the better. So I think, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that Abyssal, in a lot of other seasons, would have been a comfortably mid-tier team as they are performing now. So it's hard for them, and we've said it many times, they've got the pieces, and I would be very excited to be wrong. In some ways,
Same.
I've set up my predictions to be wrong and see how wrong I am.
That's you and I are in different philosophies here, man. I know I'm right.
Look, okay. I'm wearing the cat suit. I've got the beard. I looked like a mountain man.
Oh, you got to show off the tail,
right?
Oh yeah,
I do have a tail. See, it's right Here, tail.
Oh my god.
I love,
Um,
Oh my god.
I love this podcast.
uh,
I love this
In fact,
podcast so much.
but
wait, it just gotta
I'm
add.
already enough of a laughing stock as it is.
You forgot to mention
So
Colonel, what's up?
he forgot to mention he shaved his legs. Don't show it on camera.
I did. Vodka up
Just
the
everyone
ante,
put
and
that image.
I also had to shave my legs.
Oh my god.
Did you do
So I
it, or
just had to
did
make
your
sure
wife
that
do it for
we
you?
will save you the horror of seeing that.
It's Twitch TOS. We can't.
Too much bear skin.
Talking about double round robin and the opportunity for these teams to meet each other again, it's going to be a great opportunity for FTD and MIT to try again and see if we can
Yeah.
get Colonel to have a fake beard.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yes.
It'll be
I'd
great.
like that.
Never.
Just glue it onto your face.
Week 7,
Just-
the
no, I'm
official
kidding.
stream.
Do we have any? I think we've covered most of. Do we have any other thoughts on this? On
we can
this
we
group?
could dive a little
I
deeper.
think that regardless of where the standings are, I think the one thing that we all agree on, and that so far the data, quote unquote, shows to be correct, is that there is going to be a very, very harsh gap in the void
Mhm.
between the top teams and the bottom teams. And it's not necessarily between 3 and 4, right?
Right.
We don't know where that gap is.
Yeah.
But
But
we can
there's
feel
going
it.
to be a much harsher gap.
Would you say that there's going to develop a void in between some of these teams?
We could say that there's going to develop a void. That some teams might not have the technology to cross. Space travel may not be invented.
Anyways, we've got the void is making itself manifest within this division or within this group. Let's jump down to the Shadow Isles and discuss our next set of 6 teams. This includes Arcquake, Monkeys in Training, Feed the Dream Black, Submersive Gaming, Crosspoint Koalas, and Revolution Esports. Let's jump into it. What's standing out to us right now? Do we have any heavy overlap?
Yes.
Wait, did me
our
and- did me and
bottom
Colonel-
teams are all the same.
Our bottom
Yes.
two. They
Our
wow,
bottom
Almost
2 teams
perfect.
are all
Literally
the
the same. Yep.
we were so
We
close
all
to being
have
connected again,
cross-pointed
Colonel.
6th.
So close. I almost put that. I'm gonna be completely honest, but
You know, so I mean, I can talk a little bit about my picks. I think that Chinese Spy is just a beast. So I've got Monkeys in Training.
say it again for them in the back.
I think that Chinese Spy is a beast. Like he is. I guess I'm a mid jungle guy because the same thing I felt about Bot God and help me, Bot God and
Godfather. Oh no, wait, Young Rich Boy.
Young Rich Boy. Yeah, I feel the same way about Chinese Spy and Bird Nurse. I think that Chinese Spy is a great player, and Bird Nurse is so good at enabling his players. They are just allowing their laners to go wild, and that's going to be really difficult for other teams in this group to handle. I think.
So one of the things that I want to say about MIT here is that MIT right now is super, super good at preventing team fights from being flipped.
Yeah.
This is true.
If that makes sense, right?
That
The
makes
way
sense.
that
That
they
makes sense.
position, the way that they set up for a team fight, it makes it incredibly difficult for the other team to find an opportunity in that. It's incredibly oppressive in that way. Once MIT groups, it's very, very difficult to then regain control because of that 5v5.
And I also think so. My prediction is that if MIT can beat Arc tonight, then that will set them up for a undefeated first round robin, and that is really difficult to pull a team from first place that has gone through the gauntlet and beaten every team one time.
So my concern, actually, for MIT isn't that MIT is good. It isn't that MIT has good players. It's that they have too many good players.
That
Too
makes me
much of a
happy.
good thing.
Suffering from
And I'm
success.
being serious, right? So we've talked about swag a lot. MIT just picked up Dog Woof Woof.
Yes, we did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so like they just picked up another top tier jungler.
Just hoarding
They
players,
just
man.
picked up Serm. They've just picked up another, at least historically, top tier mid, right?
Mhm.
They've picked up these other players that are top tier and that have the ability to start. That they're not necessarily going to be comfortable being on the bench. And I think that MIT is a skilled enough organization to navigate through all that. But I think that it might cause them to drop games.
I
Not
think that,
necessarily this week, because they're riding high.
I have to pat myself on the head and give myself a little ego boost. Honestly, if I could have seven numbers on this list, number 1 would be Monkeys in Training, and number 2 would be the Monkeys in Training sub roster. We actually very confidently we don't have a sub support, but other than that, we have 9 of the best players in the league. And while I totally agree, Leopard, there is a point to be made there. I think 2 things. I think one, that is always something that we have done. We want our players to climb. We want them to hit gold. Our goal is for all of our Monkeys in Training to graduate and into Literal Monkeys gold rosters. So that's why we always are going to have a bunch of subs. And I think it speaks wonders to the infrastructure that we have, that good players want to come here because they want to hit gold, because they want to start climbing, and because we've had a good history of doing that.
So to me, this group closely resembles last split's IBS as a whole, in that we have these top 2 teams, Monkeys in Training and Arc, that are the Raw and Revolution from last split, and then it's everyone else is kind of racing to get to that third, right? You've got FTD, you've got Revolution again, but like you have these teams that are battling out for those spots that lead up to that. But to me, I don't see any end of season after week 10 scenario where those 2 teams are not the top 2
disagree
teams.
with this comparison, right? And the way that
Okay.
you're implying
I
things
agree
there.
with that.
Because last split we had a clear top 3, right? And the top 3 only lost to the teams above them. So RAR was number 1 and they did not lose to anybody. Revolution was number 2 and they only lost to RAR. And FTD was number 3 and they only lost to RAR and Revolution. And then once you got below that, people started losing to other people.
Right.
The soup.
And I don't think we're going to see that same kind of pattern.
I think we are. I think we almost exactly painted the picture.
I think it's going to be,
especially with double round robin. I do not think we're going to see that kind of thing. If we were doing a single round robin, doing the same format as last split, I would be on board, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think that, like, Arcanists is a great organization, right? They have the structure, they have the coaching staff. They're a great team. I can't imagine that if Arcanists loses to MIT today, right? Which is, if I'm predicting that match, that's the way that I think it's going to go. I don't think that Arcanists is going to come in to the rematch unprepared. Does that make sense? Like, that's one of the things that I'm really excited for with the double round robin, is that seeing teams come back knowing how the other team plays is going to be huge.
I want to.
Go ahead, Decker.
I want to talk about Arc Quake a bit, or Arcanist Quake. They have, so we all have them, well, except for Colonel, have them in the top 2. You know, you guys have them first.
I didn't realize I was the only one who did that.
I have them in second. You know, but if we're being objective and looking at this at the field as a whole, they've had the easiest schedule of anybody in the league so far. They played against Subversive and Crosspoint for their first 2 weeks. What my rationale for having them in that spot is a couple things. One, those games went the way they should have gone if they want to be a top team. They really weren't close, at least from like us looking at them. They weren't close. They and they also didn't have a solid all-star. Like it felt like every game so far they played 4 games, and in all 4 games someone has popped off, and it's been someone different most of the time. They even had one of the games, I think it was this past week, where the support was like 8-0-9 on Swain, and by far the most fed person on the team, and just like giga carrying these team fights. So I think it's an interesting thing to have a team that has so much potential around the map. Captain Ryu is a really great top laner, and I think he is going to be where I'm watching to see the consistent performances. But I think this team has a lot of threats, and that's my match that's going to tell me a lot this week. MIT and Abyssal, or not Abyssal, sorry, Arcquake, and just I'm excited to see where that falls and how they look after that.
I think so. You're making good points. Like they played the bottom 2 teams, right? And this is their first big test, and they've shown a huge variety, a huge flexibility in the ability to play these games out, different win conditions, all of that. Um, I think I feel a lot less confident in my rankings here than I did in the Void, and I know my rankings in the Void were kind of wild, but I think FTD has the potential to be a powerful team, right? I don't have a strong read on them. I am kind of hyping myself up on Revolution and the growth that team is showing, and ultimately I feel like going back to this, arc beating Crosspoint, arc beating Subversive is important, and they needed to do that. Like if they didn't do that, that's massive, right? But I also think that Subversive and Crosspoint will get to a point later in the season, maybe in the second round robin, that they're going to start taking games off of. They might. I think both of them might take a full match off of one other team above them, and I think there's a lot of volatility to me in kind of the middle of the bracket here.
So just because we haven't mentioned it in like 30 minutes, this is not for power rankings. This is
not
predictions for the end of season.
It's also not live.
Standings will be week 10.
It's also not live, and Leper has a tail. Those are all important things to know. I think so. My read on FTD, and I have them third, and that feels kind of bad. I think they're getting a lot of punishment in my mind because they lost to MIT in a 2-0. Like if they were lost in a 2-1, I think I would have them in second place. FTD does something different, and Leper, obviously you have the inside scoop here. I don't see a lot of IBS teams that play that enables bot lanes to carry. I think most IBS teams let the bot lanes survive until team fights, and then they can get ahead. FTD is the only team to me that has a bot-centric play style, and I think I can't decide where that puts them for me, because one, other bot lanes are in the play safe, don't take risk mode, so that can make it difficult for FTD's bot lane to get ahead. But two, if they do get ahead, they're going to just roll over the team. They're just going to roll through people. What do you think,
So,
Leper?
Colonel will agree with me on this one, right? And I would agree that we're definitely a bot-centric team, which is a departure from the past several FTD teams. But Colonel will agree with me on this one. That's a super old school IBS thing.
Oh yeah.
Like this is like last year changed that, right? Like in 2019, every IBS team was bot centric. Every IBS team was bot centric. You played around bot. It's all about the AD carry. And Praxin, Attila, K, like there's more, right?
Yeah.
There's more.
E
and J at the time, right? So it's interesting that you're saying that as a DP, when to me, like that's a return to the way that things.
Well, season 10 was like the historic terrible season for AD carries, so it made it really difficult for anyone to play through bot lane, honestly.
Right. And we also saw, though, too, in interesting ways, the teams that had the bot lanes that were best at surviving and doing well off of little resources did the best last split.
Yes.
Or last season in general. So no, I definitely agree that we're a bot centric team, and that the issues we've been showing are not around bot or junk; they're around solo lanes.
I think for me, FTD and Revolution are the two teams that are most likely to drop games to Subversive and Crosspoint, and that's why I have them sitting in that 3 and 4 spot.
I would agree with that. I would
And
agree with that entirely.
and that's why I have Arcanus and MIT higher. Is because I don't think they drop games to lower quality teams, right?
And because
I
they
think they're
haven't
gonna-
already, right? They've already not done
Exactly.
that. Yeah.
And they've done it convincingly, right? Revolution this split is going to be a team that's going to fight for every win, whether or not it's a win that we would expect them like to get or not, right? And I think that's part of a rebuilding phase, and that's part of growing new talent and stuff like that. Speaking from a Revolution perspective, and this is true for our silver team and our gold team. No game is ever a sure thing, and so they're going to come into every game trying. Like, there's always the possibility of dropping a game to anyone on this.
If I could jump on that
for us. Go ahead.
I think to explain my 2-3-4 with FTD, Arcanus, and then Revolution, I think is exactly what you're saying about where their strengths lie, and I do think that was something that when I was watching Revolution stream yesterday, because for those of you who are unaware, they did play their game early this week to avoid going over Super Bowl Sunday. Is that considering it was against Crosspoint, who is one of only 2 spots that was unanimous, and it was unanimous as 6th in the group. It didn't feel like a stomp like I would hope. If I was, it felt like a lot of people played scared. A lot of people were either unsure of themselves, unsure of their teammates, whatever it may be. It was a lack of confidence, and a lot of that comes to play styles. I think we were talking, Leper, you just said that Feed the Dream, or Decker, you were the first one to mention it, that Feed the Dream is a bot-centric team. And I think while I think Arcanus is a better roster than Feed the Dream, like if I was power ranking them, Arcanus would be higher. But I think in the direct head-to-head, I don't think Arcanus can deal with the Feed the Dream bot lane.
I would say it this way, and this is I guess the weird thing that I would say, right? Is that the fact that Feed the Dream can take, or has the potential to lose to Crosspoint and Subversive, is the same reason that they also have the potential to beat MIT and Arcanus.
Can you explain that a little bit?
And that I almost want to exactly disagree with you.
So this is my thought process, at least, and I would put Revolution in the same category, right? That whereas MIT in particular is a very, very, once we have the lead, once we are in control, we are going to stay in control kind of thing. FTD and Revolution are much more willing to take a risk, so to speak, to catapult that lead ahead. So they're willing to gamble and throw that game off of an attempt to cement things or to catapult that lead further, right?
Yeah.
And I think that willingness to take risks is necessary to beat these top teams. But it also opens you up to losing to teams below you.
That's totally fair.
If that play and if that decision goes wrong.
If I could dispute that just a little bit, I think,
of course,
while I do agree with that, I feel like we have to sort of take a tighter lens when we look at something like that. Like, if we look role by role, I think it's less of a team identity of pushing those advantages, is more of a player identity on pushing those advantages.
I would agree.
And that's why I have Feed the Dream above Arcanus, for example, because the Feed the Dream bot lane pushes their advantage. I feel like when you say that Feed the Dream will take those risks, I feel like a lot of it comes off of Snuggle. And I think a lot of Arcanist exact same quality comes from top mid. And what I had to decide was can Feed the Dream top mid survive Arcanist top mid, because bot lane will be in Feed the Dream's favor. And I decided on yes. And then the only other argument that had to be made was MIT, I think, where you see pushing the advantage. Because you're right, compared to other rosters, we don't need to do that as much, partially because we've just gotten passive advantages very, very early in the game. But the players that I look at when MIT does push the advantage is Crockpot. Crockpot had an amazing series last week and was disgusting on Renekton top. And when Arcanist goes against MIT, and that's the real question, is that matchup, that's this matchup, that this week's matchup that you have to watch, is we're playing similar styles. Our solo lanes are godlike, and Arcanist, Quake's solo lanes are definitely their strong point, and it's which ones come on top. So I think when you look at all four of the top four rosters, you have to look more specifically. And that's why I have trouble with Revolution, because Revolution, I feel like, is the only one where I can't pick either solo lanes or bot lane. I feel like top jungle is so good for Revolution. And mid, Lynx had a decent series yesterday, actually. But I think he was a big point of worry for me, where I can't say the solo laners are confident, right? Because Lynx, if you're watching this, we were watching it in Little Monkey server, and it hurt to watch. You EW autoed on Galio, got with your passive ready, and 3/4 HP the enemy mid laner, and then you were scared, and you farmed passively and didn't look for any fights. Like I can't say, like, he looks so much better than in week 1, but until he finds confidence in the mid lane, I cannot say that I can look to Revolution solo lanes as a point of contention. So that's why I have trouble rating Revolution, because when you're up against Arcanist, Quake, I think the top lane can be fine, and I think jungle's in their favor, but you don't really have all my solo lanes are going to win, or my bot lane's going to win and my solo laners can stay safe, where for Feed the Dream you can.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. I'm curious. So one of the things with Lynx is I think we're learning his identity a little bit. Week 2, he had an incredible series on Seraphim, where he played a very utilitarian
Big fan of that
role.
champ.
Decker, you shut the hell up. I'm kidding, Decker. A little bit, just a little bit. But your conversation around identity is really interesting. I think that honestly draws the line. Like I would probably go back through. Like I spent a lot of time wishy-washy between 3 and 4, with Revolution and Feed the Dream, and to me it's kind of, they're both at 3.5, right? I have a lot of confidence in Feed the Dream and Leper and company to step up, and they are a playoff team, right? I'm thinking at week 10, and I'm thinking with the identities and the solidification of these rosters and how they play the game, I don't see the top 4, Arc, MIT, Rev, FTD. I don't see any of them not making playoffs. I see where they land in playoffs being upset at times, with maybe Revolution taking the second round robin off of FTD, or SG taking a match off of Revolution, or something like that, where we're going to have some upsets because the lack of identity, or the lack of kind of growing effectively into what your win conditions are by that point in time. But to me, I don't feel there's volatility in the top 4, and there's just a solid non-playoff pair in the bottom to me.
So
when I'm looking at
my take is unfortunate that Subversive is in this group, because they're probably, in my opinion, going to be the best team that doesn't make playoffs.
I was going to say literally the
feel
same
bad.
thing. I kind of wanted to have a quick conversation around what we think Subversive or Crosspoint need to do to make playoffs. And my first point was going to be Subversive just needs to not be in Shadow. like they just need to not be in Shadow.
I mean,
because I get we talked about
think
this.
that for Subversive to win, they are going to need to either do one of two things to make it, and that is they need to get either a star player or macro perfect.
I would add one more, and I think it would be recognize what your current win con is, and it's the same for me as it was week one, and it's their bot lane. It's like
Right.
Shadow, like Snowy Fae and Shadowfax. I still think are of a great duo, and maybe it's giving them more resources. Now the problem is when you go up against a Feed the Dream, who has another solid bot lane, that's going to be difficult for you to overcome that. When Feed the Dream also has probably more carry potential in the solo laners also. But I think it's going to be Rhymes just kind of looking at his bot lane like, hey, this is where I've got to spend my time and get them ahead.
Yeah, and that's kind of the problem in its own way. It's like they've got ability, right?
They got pieces.
It's just unfortunately like below the teams above them. You get what I mean? And I guess this is
how
the
standings
example,
work.
right? Right? It's like, well, like, and I'll use Revolution as an example, right? Like, there's not a lot of ability to compare Denobi to Roland. There's not a lot of ability to, well, and even though like you can make the argument, right, of comparing Snowy Fae and Shadowfax to Spanx and Fueled by Self-Hate, the gap isn't big enough to overcome the Denobi Roland gap. If it's just as an example, and I'm not trying to pick on Roland, I think Roland's a great player. That's to me is the issue of Subversive, is that they have good players. They have good players across the board. It's they have to be better than their opponents at using those pieces, and that's what they need to do to be able.
Colonel, what you got?
I would disagree a little bit. I feel like what you said at the very end is something more akin to what I would agree with. You have the right players, you just know how to use them, was what you said. And this is my problem with all of the teams that I'm not confident in. And I'm going to include Revolution in that because Revolution is probably has the highest chance out of our top 4 to not make it. Although I'm pretty confident that they will make it. And the problem that I see with all 3 of these bottom rosters is an identity. We spent so much time talking about what MIT, Feed the Dream, and Arcanist identities are and how they interact with each other and how those games will look. And we can't do that for the bottom 3 because it's not really well defined. And you said that for Rev that you're starting to find that by finding an individual player's identity, but to really find out what your team excels at and to use that. When like we haven't talked much about Crosspoint. I think I really do think jungle is a player to watch, and enabling your jungler. I mean, is probably the only roster in
King of Brawl, right?
Yes. I think it's the only roster in Shadow Isles. It arguably maybe the only roster in all of IBS CGG that looks to their jungle as their sole win condition. But they haven't. And why, I don't know, but they should, because they need a win condition. You need something to play to, and if it doesn't work, then you can refine it. But the problem is their gameplay is crude because you don't know what you're refining, so you cannot refine it yet. And whichever team can find what they want to play to and refine that is going to be the one that gets out.
That's a really good point, and I think I have to agree with you. And I think elements of what you're saying is kind of leans towards what Leper's been talking about, where understanding and having defined win conditions that the team has a mold, a habit, a practice of playing to. Monkeys in Training has it. Feed the Dream has it. Arcquake seems to have it, even if it's just everyone can win and we'll just let it organically flow, right? Arcquake is of the top three kind of hard to tell because, like we said, they've played SG and Crosspoint so far. And then to me, Revolution is the barrier. It's not the barrier, it's the transition point, right? So you're talking like Subversive and Crosspoint are teams that are furthest from leaning into an identity, and I think Revolution kind of has this hazy idea of what our identity is, and sometimes we get to play towards it and it works, and then sometimes we don't and it doesn't work. And that's, I think I have to agree that with the volatility of Subversive and Crosspoint that come the second round robin, there's a chance that one of those teams can pick up a couple super serious wins and end up in the top four at at the expense of what would likely be Revolution. I I'm really excited. I think there's a lot of room for growth across all of these teams. And there's a
Absolutely.
lot of information that we're going to gather in the next
So,
several weeks, starting with today.
Yeah, I think
right.
tonight's a big tell for a lot of
A
questions
huge
are going to
tell
start to
for
get answered tonight.
all of this.
So,
Absolutely.
before we move on, I want to say one thing to all the people out there building a team, because this is going to be my fourth split in ZGG. I've watched BOL, I've watched Risen, and this seems to be universally true in both Gold and IBS teams. If you have 5 players, the recipe for success is to figure out what the easiest way for those 5 players to win is. That's it. By figuring out what that identity is, by figuring out how you draft to that identity, by figuring out how you play that identity out in different variations, that's how you win leagues. It's the thing that top teams have that bottom teams don't, regardless of player strength. And there are teams out there that, because of player strength, they can go far without this. But this is the almost universal thing that separates top teams from not top teams, is having a sense of identity. So I urge anybody that is thinking of getting into building a team, that wants to put a team together, picks are important. Champion meta is important. But what's more important is the internal meta or the identity of your team. Figuring that out is the most indicative key of success. That's why we're sitting here kind of amazed by Fallen University, by Arcanus Quake, for teams that we've not seen in the IBS space having an identity. And that's something that, like, we look at Crosspoint and we look at our Abyssal teams near the bottom, that they don't have. And that's, as somebody who sees a lot of teams struggle with this split after split after split, it's something that I wanted to get off my chest, and I didn't have a better time to say it than now.
That was a good time. And we do have to swap. I do just want to get one quick point in for just Subversive and Crosspoint. It doesn't matter if the win condition you pick is the right one. Just pick one. Just pick one. There's so little time to waste. Every game matters. Just pick one. If it's Roland, if it's your ADC, if it's Snowy Fae, I don't care. But pick one and work on it. And if it doesn't work, try
it doesn't matter if they know what's coming, if they can't deal with it.
Yep, exactly.
A bad decision made as a team is better than five good decisions made individually.
Yes.
In a lot of ways, especially in IBS, because if you just
especially in IBS,
man, you can just run it. Let's no better time than now to jump at the big picture view and look at the standings as they exist today on the 7th of February in this year, 2021.
So, hot take, Revolution IBS, top team in the entire league right now.
Best team in the league.
Undisputed.
Ignore the fact that they've got an extra game.
Right at this moment, Revolution IBS is the top team.
Yep.
Yeah, nothing has changed.
Change in 12 hours, but right now, Revolution IBS is the top team.
All I see is that RAR is just not here anymore, so we're the best. We're the best.
I mean,
That's what's happening.
when you fail at submitting an application, it's really hard to be a top team.
One of my favorite things about the Void division is that there's only one team that's 2-0 that's undefeated.
Yeah.
I like a really competitive. So seeing that all these 1-1s, it's really exciting, and it makes it really hard for us to make predictions. Which again, if you're tuning in now, all that was predictions, not power rankings. We weren't power ranking anyone. It was just us throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what we thought might happen at the end of the season.
My power ranks are probably wildly different than what I
I'd have
predicted.
to agree.
I would agree with that.
100%.
I would agree
I'd
with
have
that
to agree.
entirely.
I mean, it's GSG first in both groups. I don't know how it works, but it's first in both groups.
I love it so much. Oh,
Obviously, then Revolution second.
I think that one of the things here that's interesting is like we always go on about this whenever there's two divisions. There's a strong, quote unquote, strong group and a weak group, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like the telltale thing here is how would we compare, as an example, FTD at 1-1 to the 4-1-1 teams in Void?
Mm.
I don't think one group is inherently better than the other right now.
I disagree.
think.
Oh.
What?
I disagree, but
You disagree?
Carol
Okay.
disagrees.
yes.
So
I think.
I'll
Go
say
ahead.
I think that there's one group has a more clearly defined top 2 or top 3, but I'm sort of I want to hear this from Colonel because I'm kind of with Tex here. Like I don't think that one team is inherently stronger. So let's hear this pitch.
I don't. I mean, again, irrational predictions and everything, obviously, but I think the top teams. I think the parity across the board, top teams versus top teams from one group to the other, I think they would be competitive. Middle teams to middle teams, I think they would be competitive. And bottom teams to bottom teams, maybe Shadow Isles is better, right? If I'm looking at Abyssal versus Subversive or Crosspoint, I think Crosspoint are possibly a better team. I don't know. I made a hot take, and I am realizing I might have not thought it entirely through. But I'm still going with my gut here. And my gut's telling me that there's not a huge disparity across these two groups.
Colonel?
I disagree. I think how big of a gap you see in Void between first and everybody else that we can debate for a long time if what MIT versus the Fallen looks like. I'll be a little bit too biased to really put in my 2 cents, but I think looking at the 2-3-4 for Shadow Isles, the 2-3-4-5 for Shadow Isles just looks better than the 2-3-4-5 for Void.
I can be convinced.
If Subversive was in the Void, they'd make playoffs. That is the tell. They will not make playoffs. They will have a very difficult time to make playoffs in Shadow Isles, and it would have been smooth sailing in the Void because the middle table is so much more competitive that MIT, FTD, ARC all are watching out for their games against each other as much as they're watching out for the games against Revolution, against Subversive, because it's so much closer that whoever's gonna make it is gonna make it by the smallest of margins. Versus in the Void, if you make it, you made it, and if you didn't, then you very clearly did not.
I have to agree with that. I've been convinced. I'm looking at this. I'm looking at the competitive, like the competition across the teams from in that middle of the pack, right? If you were to take Subversive and drop them in the Void, right? Them having a stronger chance of making playoffs there, and the fact that like in Shadow Isles, it feels like every spot is kind of up for grabs to some degree, right? And like you said, every team is going into each match. Every match has substance. Every match has consequence. Whereas in the Void, you've got your top teams that are going to be your top teams, and then
see, I don't
so
think
on.
that's how it is at all. Like I like to me, it looks like
I think outside of like right now, we would say clearly in the void that TFU is number one.
Yes.
Right.
And
Agreed.
then just looking at peak and valley, right?
Mhm.
It's hard to separate those at number two.
Yes.
Because
I agree.
Beyblades at their peak looks a lot better than Goon Squads at their valley. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? And then the same can be applied anywhere else. I just the feel, quote unquote, right, is I feel that Revolution or ARC or FTD or MIT give fewer openings compared to CBR, compared to VB. And that's I guess the where I'm coming from, right? I think that it is a fair statement to say right now that if we were putting like tiering everything, right, there would only be two teams in top tier, and that's MIT and TFU.
Yeah.
I think you guys
And
are
then we
you
have
guys are
Or
somehow
not, it depends
mismatch
on tonight,
of
because
you
teams.
guys are
if
forgetting that VBU on a week where they looked like shit took a game off of TFU. I feel like you guys keep forgetting that, and like that needs to be remembered.
I'm sorry,
and then
I'm on
they
the bot god hype train. Okay, we have
Yeah,
not we
Bot
have
God's
not
incredible.
seen the things slow down yet.
Yeah, I
Now we
agree.
might see them slow down today,
They
and we
slowed
might see
down.
something.
They slowed down in at least one game versus VBU though, because they lost,
That was the very first game of the entire split, and they
and they
haven't
lost
slowed
it.
down since.
and
They
Tucker,
did
Tucker,
in
look at
in the
they already
longest
changed the
game
roster.
of the entire split.
It's a different roster.
It's not
You're
completely
you're
different.
right. You're right. That was
It's not.
considering
Yeah,
how good the
I.
Fallen looks. No. Considering how good the Fallen looks, right?
Mhm.
They lost to the Fallen,
Yes.
and then they played phenomenal.
Hmm.
And then they changed their roster. They had a lot of great points. I would agree with you 100% if the roster had stayed consistent. And they won 2-0, and they said, let's take that page of the book and rip it out and start over.
I don't know. I think that they made. I think they made good roster moves. Like I think you're gonna see a very competitive VBU. And I think that if VBU is in Shadow, so I don't disagree with you guys that Shadow is the stronger of the divisions. What I disagree is that I feel like you guys are talking very definitively, and I don't think it's clear cut as it's
No.
being
It's
presented.
Not at all. This is why writing power rankings fucking sucks.
Yeah, it's impossible. It's
It's impossible.
impossible.
It's
And it's
terrible.
also week 3. We're going into week 3, right?
Right.
Like,
We're going into week 3. We've got
but it's
everything can
fun.
change. We spoke this definitively last week, and then
We did.
half the things that we
then
said
half the focus had changed.
completely wrong.
I just want to say,
We
I just
just
want to
need a
say,
cross division week, man. We just need cross division week. That's
Just
what we
one.
need.
Yes.
Just one cross division week.
We'll just need to organize cross division scribs for
It's
our
like
own
after
amusement.
the first round robin, let's
have a mid-season.
Let's have a mid-season. We'll try to set it up to where first team plays first team. Second, like that would be really fun. It might have to be an unofficial.
We will never have it as an official thing, but if we
Right.
do it unofficially, if teams are interested in participating, I think it would be a lot of fun.
I would,
least
as the
for
owner
the
of
amusement of silver scraps.
as the owner of GSG, I would be willing to put up a little prize for that also.
Ooh.
So we can talk more about that later, but let's have a conversation not on podcast maybe about something we could do that would be spicy.
Let's push towards wrapping things up here real quick. So we've gotten a chance to talk through the void and what our week 10, again, reiterating this, everything we talked about today is all about our week 10 predictions, where we think things are going to end up, and some of why we think that, often irrationally so. So we've talked about the void. We've talked about the fallen university. We've talked about some surprises, some upsets, our anime protagonist in GSG. We've talked about Shadow Isles. We've talked about the volatility across the board from first to sixth, and the potential that teams like Subversive and Crosspoint have to keep everyone on their toes. And we've got some exciting matchups there coming up this week, and that's what I want to talk to you guys about. Is what are some exciting matchups that you guys are looking to? This is kind of like Leper's question, right? What are the matchups this week that we're looking at? Let's start
So
with
There's only one
Leper.
correct
Go ahead.
answer here.
the
There's
big
only
one,
one.
the big one. There's two for me,
I've got
and
two
that's
also. Yeah.
So one of
MIT
them,
Leper, hit us
versus
with
Arcquake.
yours.
What? Who's good?
I said MIT versus Artquake.
That's
Okay.
the
Is
big
one.
one. That's a big one.
That's
that's
That
the correct
answers
one.
The
that
other
answers
one-
a lot of questions about Artquake,
Yes.
right?
it
Yes.
does. It
Um,
really is.
I don't,
This
even,
is
I don't even
Artquake
think
test.
I don't even think if MIT loses this, I don't think we learn really much about MIT except that they can lose. But if
Right.
Artquake lose or win, we learn a lot about that team and how they do either of those things.
Actually the bigger one for me than that is Goon
Looking at the
Squad
schedule,
Alpha
I think
versus
we're-
CB Rookies.
That was mine. Goons GSG versus
And that's
CBR.
on stream.
I didn't realize
That's
this
on
was being
stream.
played.
And I
as
want to
soon as
say
saw
though,
the
I want to
schedule,
say preemptively, in CB Rookies' defense, if they lose, it's because they wanted to watch the Super Bowl and we wouldn't let them.
Oh no! Oh no!
Oh, no.
This week is the definitive week for me. So I've been on the anti-train here. I've been the negative to y'all's, positive end of this thing here with CB rookies. And I think I said last week that week 3 and what was it, week 5 were going to be the really telling weeks for me. I did not expect the week 2 result, and that was more telling than I ever thought it could be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm gonna amend my expectations or amend my statements from last episode to say if this week is not competitive, they can lose, that's fine, but if this week is not competitive and things collapse, then I am nervous for CBR.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I stand. So CBR versus Goon Squad and Monkeys of Training versus Artquake are two of the biggest matches for me this week.
can I directly answer that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now that I've looked at the schedule, GSG versus CB Rookies is a huge match, and I want to say the exact flip coin of that. We're talking about Shadow Isles being more competitive. If CBR beats GSG, and Beyblades has already beaten CBR,
Yeah.
and GSG soon to beat Beyblades, and all of a sudden it's a circle, then the bottom 2 spots for the Void become incredibly open, and then all of a sudden the Void is a group of death where I have no idea who's getting out.
Yeah.
Right.
I
This-
don't
the-
I don't want to sleep
on.
on also so I think that those two are really great options but I am really looking at FTD and Subversive because I think that so FTD had a rough week versus MIT last week. Subversive, we've all agreed that they have a lot of potential, but starting 03 can just kill potential. And we talked about sort of the Rev FTD potential of dropping games to Subversive and allowing them to crawl into that 4th spot. This is if Subversive lose, it doesn't kill it because this is a long season. We've got 10 weeks to play. It makes it really hard.
We talked last week.
In good news, we won't find out until
oh my
after
gosh,
week
you're right.
4.
I forgot that.
Oh,
my
no,
Lord.
that changes everything.
I hate.
Yeah,
I
so
hate
that
this.
is tentatively rescheduled to February 17th.
I forgot that, and now I'm so mad.
I'm so angry. You suck. Oh, that makes me so sad.
Beyblades versus Fallen University is the other one. Like between
listen.
Goon Squad versus CB Rookies and Fallen University versus Beyblades, that might change our script on what the Void division is.
Can we please all
let's get
agree to
technical.
stop giving a shit about the Super Bowl? No one cares. we have IBS
PSG
games to play.
versus CV Rookies.
I just
is
care
the
about
biggest
the amount
competitive
of tips
event
that I
of
get
this
delivering
Sunday
pizza.
in February.
Agreed.
All right.
Who would watch the Super Bowl over GSG versus CB
I'm
Rookies?
literally gonna have my phone up watching GSG while Tom Brady hopefully gets his ass kicked.
No,
by
it's
Mahomes.
GSG on the TV and Tom Brady on your
Oh.
phone. Like that's the correct.
It's not
way
even
to
gonna be
do
Tom Brady
that.
on my phone. It's gonna be like Kansas City radio on my car in the -10 degree weather. I don't know what I'm talking about. Iowa weather sucks, by the way.
Did you say your wrong state? Did you say the wrong state you live in?
No, I live in Iowa, but
Okay.
KC is nearby.
Oh, okay.
and
Okay. I got you.
I'm rooting for KC because I hate Tom Brady and I also like Mahomes. So it's like a
There we
win-win.
go.
And my team is the Texans. I don't have a team. I don't want to talk about it, okay? I don't want to talk about it.
I hate
Let's
to
get
pull
them
it back.
Yes,
So
pull
can
it
we
back,
agree
Nick.
pull it
though?
back, pull it
Can we
back.
agree though, with the zealousness that CBR have about the Super Bowl, that if they lose, it's just because they wanted to watch the game?
It's Tom Brady's
not.
fault. Yes.
It's Tom Brady. That's all. So,
Okay.
Colonel, I want to get your last thoughts in. So we've all got Leper, myself, and Decker have gotten to go through our highlighted matches. I want to get your highlighted matches before we close out this show.
I can tell you
All
what
right.
else is.
I'm, other than the obvious one, other than the correct answer, which is MIT art, I think I'm actually going to differ from you guys a little bit. I think Beyblades versus Fallen is my question mark, because I am super high on Willowhaven. I think he's a really great jungler, and if there's anybody in this group that's gonna put Bot God under pressure, it'd be him.
Okay.
And I think, hopefully, coming off the high of winning last week, of beating CB rookies, I'm hoping that if they beat Fallen, this group looks really spicy, because then all of a sudden it's like because then
it blows everything up. It just destroys the entire.
Right. The dream scenario for me is that Beyblade beats Fallen and CB Rookies beats Goon Squad, and then all of a sudden the Void becomes the most entertaining show that I'm glad I'm not a part of.
100%.
So those would be my games to watch.
Well, thank you, Colonel. Thank you, Decker. Thank you, Leper. And thank you, everyone, for watching. We've gotten the chance to go through all of our. We've gotten to go through the Void, the Shadow Isles, give our irrational predictions for the end of the season at Week 10, what we think things are going to look like. We've gotten to talk through some of our relative valuations between the two groups versus each other, and we've gotten to talk through what we're excited to see. And honestly, might be the biggest spread of games that we've said we're excited to see since the start of the season. And tonight's going to be crazy, and I'm excited. I'm so excited. I'm so excited for what's going on.
Except that we don't get an FTD game, and I'm upset about
Except
that.
we don't get FTD, and it's saddening to not get.
That would have been
more of
FTD Subversive is going to be a good game, and I'm sad. I'm sad boy now.
With that, are there any final thoughts before we wrap everything up?
I'm
good. Subversive and Crosspoint, pick someone to play to and play with them. And Subversive, you have an extra 2 weeks of practice.
There you go. We're looking to see you guys play that underdog story and be our next anime protagonists, obviously. Thank you, everyone. This has been a great show. Thanks for watching, and that'll be it for us. Have a good night.